Hi everyone, Matthew DeSantis here with NYRA Bets, here with another week of track stats where we connect you with free handicapping data to make you a better bettor at tracks across the country. Before we get into the relevant track stats this week, just want to make sure to remind you to like this video and subscribe to the NYRA Bets YouTube channel. Subscribing is completely free of cost and will just notify you when new videos drop on the channel, which is always helpful because we have a lot of great content for you, whether it be race previews or full card analyses, but also we have so much content getting you ready for the 2024 Breeders' Cup. We have a weekly show countdown to the Cup. We're going to have top 5 videos coming out to get you ready for the top contenders in different races. And we're going to have a lot of very interesting trainer-specific information, as well as some relevant Del Mar track stats as it relates to the Breeders' Cup races this year. Now, let's dive into track stats where we are going to be talking about how post-time favorites are performing at Belmont at the Big A, Keeneland, and Santa Anita. We're also going to look at winning trip analysis by distance and surface at those 3 tracks. Again, this data is all entirely free. If you go to NYRA Bets or have the NYRA Bets app, you can get all the relevant track stats for these 3 tracks and then a rotating group of tracks across the year. In the winter, we're going to be doing Gulfstream Park. For the championship meet, we're going to be doing Turfway Park. We'll continue to go do Aqueduct. We'll have Tampa Bay Downs. We'll do a lot of different tracks for you all year round. We're going to have Oaklawn starting up here soon again, too. So, like I said, a lot of different tracks to make sure to follow on NYRA Bets. Well, let's dive into this week's track stats and give you the updated information with regards to field size. Now, just to give you some context, this is through 5 weeks at Belmont at the Big A, through 3 weeks at Santa Anita, and through 2 weeks at Keeneland. So a little bit of different in terms of the N size and the N count for some of these numbers that you're looking at. But let's take a look at average field size, because I do feel like that's a really important factor when we start talking about how are favorites performing. Well, field size usually is correlated with how favorites are performing, but notably this week, it's actually not at all. But you'll see Keeneland having your largest average field size, 9.5 entries overall for their first 2 weeks of the meet. Santa Anita, just a little over 7.5 entries, and Belmont at the Big A, right in the middle, 8.5 entries. So kind of too big, too little, just right. Maybe the Aqueduct's just right at 8.5. I kid, of course. Dirt races, you'll see field sizes are all a little bit smaller. Turf races, a little bit larger, with Keeneland having over 11 entries in every turf race. Santa Anita even having 8.5, and then Belmont having about 9.5 for those turf races. So you do see that differentiation between those two. Now, let's talk about how are favorites doing? How are post-time favorites doing? And get ready for these numbers, folks. Wow. Can you say chalky when it talks about Keeneland? This is really, really interesting. Keeneland's got the biggest average field size and yet is the chalkiest track by far out of these 3. Let's start with Belmont at the Big A, right up here in New York where I am. This is, just objectively speaking, the best betting option as a bettor that you can go to right now, because you're not going to make money betting on chalk. Now, we're going to get to that in a second, and some of the complications of saying you can bet on chalk. But at Belmont at the Big A, if you want to try to beat favorites, this is where you go to do it, because you're not going to do it at Santa Anita, and you certainly are not doing it at Keeneland. So in a lot of ways, Belmont at the Big A is where you should be going as a bettor. I'm just saying. Only 30.8% of favorites are winning. Only 60.9% of horses 4-1 or less are winning. And over 13.5% of horses that are 10-1 or higher are winning. If you flat bet the post-time favorite in New York, which is actually relatively easy to do because we lock out CAW money the last 2 minutes before post-time. So the late flood of money is usually already in the win, play, show pool by the time there's a minute or 2 to go in the race. So you have a pretty good sense of who your post-time favorite is in New York going into the gate. And if you were to bet on the post-time favorite, you would be down 28% for the meet. Now, that's if you're a chalk player, that's a terrible number, okay? If you like to try to beat chalk, which I think most of us try to do on a daily basis, that's a number you love to see because that tells you favorites are vulnerable, that the public money is not always right, that the smart money is not always right, and that you can find not just second or third choices, because again, 4-1 and under is only winning at a 61% clip. You can find 6-1, 7-1, 8-1, 10-1 winners. That's what you want to see as a bettor. Personally, I love those mid shots. I love getting a 6-1 horse home. I love getting an 8-1 horse home. I don't need 25-1 every day, but you give me a couple of 6-1 winners, you're up massively for the day. So that's really where you've seen the best betting, in my opinion, at Belmont at the Big A. Now, out at Santa Anita, it's kind of a little bit of a yin and a yang situation. Santa Anita, 41% of favorites are winning, almost 42% of favorites are winning. That's not surprising. Smaller field sizes, the dirt races tend to be overwhelmingly favored by overwhelmingly won by the favorites. And we expect that number about 40 to 42% out at Santa Anita. That's honestly what we've seen in the spring meet. We've seen this other times of the year out at Santa Anita. Not a surprise. One thing I'll give about Santa Anita is they also have some bombs that just come in that sometimes make very little sense, but 15% of their winners have been 10-1 or higher. So I always tell people when you're putting together a ticket at Santa Anita, I think on the dirt, a lot of times you can be very skinny. You can single a lot of horses, feel confident singling horses, going no more than maybe too deep. It's when you get to the turf that you tend to see things really open up. So, including a couple of long shots in your horizontal tickets is a good idea out there because you'll still get a handsome payoff, even if it chalks out for 3 of the 5 legs, because you could get a 30-1 bomb and a 15-1 bomb on the other 2 legs, and you're going to be able to make more than enough money without putting together a massive ticket. So again, I think it's just knowing when to pick and choose going to those different, when you're putting together a ticket, where are you skinny, where are you spreading? Skinny on the dirt, spread on the turf. And I think you can have some success out there and make some money despite it being a favorite heavy track. Now, listen, we got to talk about Keeneland. Through 2 weeks at Keeneland, 47% of favorites are winning. I think the only time I've seen this number higher, it was early on in, I think, the Tampa Bay Downs meet where it was like 48%. But this is about the highest number I've ever seen win through at least 2 weeks. And they've had 90-plus races at this point. It's just remarkable. 47%. If you flat bet the post-time favorite, which is a little bit more complicated because of late odds changes, but if you flat bet the post-time favorite at Keeneland, you're up 20% for the meet. So if you're a chalk player, you're looking at me going, "What's your problem, Matthew? Why is this an issue betting Keeneland? I love betting Keeneland. I'm winning. I'm up 20% for the meet because I'm betting my favorites." Okay, that's great, but the problem is the rest of us are trying to beat favorites. 71% of winners are 4-1 or under, almost 72%. Again, the highest out of all 3 tracks, and then the lowest out of all 3 tracks is where those 10-1 or higher winners are going. Got to give a shout out to my colleague Kaylee Shapiro, who gave out Legend of David over the weekend. That was a horse that was 22-1 that won at Keeneland. So she was one of the few to actually give out a 10-1 or higher winner. So shout out to Kaylee for doing a great job as I was visiting my family. She was filling in for me. And I'm just glad she hasn't taken over full time yet. She's a very, very talented young woman. If you haven't had a chance to follow her yet on social media, please make sure to do so. But Keeneland, like I said, just incredibly favorite heavy at this point. So let's look at how favorites are performing by different levels of favoritism. So if you're looking at those below even money favorites, they're performing at roughly the same rate at all 3 tracks, around, somewhere between 52 and 58%, which is not a huge variation. So you're 1-9 to 4-5 horses, 53 at Belmont at the Big A, 52 at Santa Anita, 58 at Keeneland, doing a little bit better at Keeneland, but not that much better. And also, honestly, those really short-priced favorites are not winning. I keep saying this every week, but they're not winning at as high of a rate as you would expect. Because when a horse is even money, it statistically is telling you this horse should win 50% of the time. When horses are below even money, they should obviously be winning at a higher than 50% rate. When you're getting down to a 1-9 horse, this horse should be winning at a 90% rate. So the fact that you between 1 to 9 and 4 to 5 is winning at a 53, 52, 58, they should be probably winning closer to a 60, 65% rate when you put them all together if you were to statistically average what their final odds were. So it's interesting to see they're underperforming a little bit. Now, even money 9 to 5 horses, Belmont at the Big A, only 32%, really low. Then you look at 43% at Santa Anita, 53% at Keeneland. This is where your favorites at Keeneland are just absolutely crushing. 53% of those favorites are winning. That's just incredible. That even money to 9 to 5. I mean, that's massively overperforming. Like I said, even money is supposed to win 50% of the time. Even money to 9 to 5 is supposed to win, 35, 40% of the time, probably. It's winning 53%. Incredible. 2 to 1, 3 to 1. Belmont at the Big A, only 17.5%. Santa Anita, 27, almost 28%. Keeneland, again, 40% of 2 to 1 to 3 to 1 favorites are winning. It's absolutely incredible to see this. And nobody over 3 to 1 has won yet at any of these tracks. So, wow. I mean, when you just look at the Keeneland numbers, there's just not even a lot of space to go, well, if I start seeing, weaker favorites, 5 to 2, 3 to 1, I'll bet against those. Yeah, okay. But the problem is they're still winning at a much higher rate than they should be. So, listen, they can have the biggest fields. I love Keeneland. It's a beautiful track. It's a classy track. I love their graphics. I'm going to preview some of their big races this week with the Perryville and the Raven Run. Love their product. But man alive, is it just hard to get past favorites at Keeneland so far through 2 weeks. Like I said, a significant amount of races at this point. 93 races, I believe, between those 2 weeks because they had a 5-day race week this past week going Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So let's focus a little bit just on Belmont at the Big A, and let's take a look at those dirt sprint and one-turn mile races. So in dirt sprints, what we're seeing, speed. Again, doing pretty well. 43% of horses leading at the half or 3/8 mile mark, 46% tracking within 3 lengths of the pace, 10% closing from more than 3 lengths out. I will say the number of horses that were tracking and closing did go up a little bit over the last week. The track did seem to play a little bit better, not just this week, but even the week before that. 2 horses coming from a little further off the pace. That was more notable in the one-turn miles, where you really have seen closers do a little bit better over the last couple of weeks. And obviously we saw a horse like Chancellor McPatrick make a big move from the back, but he wasn't the only one doing a one-turn mile, making a move from off the pace. You've seen horses coming from off the pace a little bit more successfully, to the point where I would say a one-turn mile, honestly, has been playing pretty fair in the aggregate to this point. Only 26 races, but to see a pretty even distribution of leaders, trackers, and closers, or at least a sufficient amount in each category, gives you the sense as a handicapper that if you like a horse that's a closer going on a one-turn mile, he or she's not running against the track. And you're not just going to get carried home on the lead as well. That's a little less so on the sprints. But like I said, in the one-turn miles, this is much more fair than what we've seen Aqueduct play before. And I think a lot of it, the last couple of weeks, has something to do with the weather. We've had phenomenal weather the last couple of weeks up here in New York. We've not seen that sort of weather bias that can affect the track, because this, if you follow New York racing, you start getting a wet track, you start getting a sloppy track. Next thing you know, front end speed just starts winning. You get a dried out track, front end speed. It tends to be a little bit more speed favoring. The rail is also an issue. That's something Andy Sterling always tracks for track trends on NYRA, which you should absolutely check out. But again, I think the good weather has led to this track being a little bit more fair in the last couple of weeks. Now let's talk about how the turf is playing. And this is another one that's really changed quite a bit from the beginning to now. And it speaks to just getting a larger end count in each category. So in turf routes, the inner turf course was used 35 times, the outer turf course 13 times. But early in the meet, you saw a few gate-to-wire winners on the outer turf course, and you didn't see any of that sort of success on the inner turf course. Well, now that 5 weeks has passed, you've gotten a little bit more cases in each category. Guess what? They look almost identical to each other. The winning sort of trips There's not a huge variation between the inner and the outer turf courses. The inner might be a little bit more closing favoring, tracking favoring, maybe a little less favorable to leaders, but honestly, I can't really say that. There's statistically no difference between how these two tracks are playing right now and two courses are playing right now, which I think is interesting because I think people as handicappers sometimes will assume, oh, one type of running style is more advantageous to one course than the other. That's not actually how it's been playing out at all. Closers have been doing well at both the inner and the outer turf course. Trackers have had success on both the inner and the outer. And honestly, after that first weekend, there's not been nearly as much success going gate to wire on the outer turf course. Of course, we almost saw Makanga pull it off this weekend in the Sands Point Stakes, but ultimately got tracked down by one of Chad Brown horses, Spaladay, there in the final lunges right before the wire. But, you know, the inner turf course, like I said, inner outer playing very, very similar. Well, let's talk about Santa Anita. And here we can definitively say there's maybe a little bit of a speed bias. I don't know. You guys tell me. I mean, listen, I'm a very big believer in the Mark Twain line that there are three types of lies, damned lies, and statistics. And so I do believe statistics can be misleading, but I also believe Santa Anita is a speed favoring track. So I don't think I'm going out on much of a limb by saying that. 23 dirt sprints, 20 dirt routes. There's been one horse that has closed from more than 3 lengths back between those 43 races. One, and it was a sprinter. And otherwise, 61% of horses winning dirt sprints have been leading at the 3/8 or half mile mark. 34% tracking, only 4% closing. In dirt routes, forget about it. 20 dirt route races, 10 of those 20 have been leading at the half mile mark. 10 of those 20 have been tracking within 3 lengths of the pace at the half mile mark, and absolutely nobody has been closing from the back of the field. So you're handicapping Santa Anita, handicap for speed. If you see a horse that likes to close, toss. I don't care what the pace looks like. Find a horse that tracks at the very least. But honestly, speed of the speed has been dangerous in dirt sprints. So just finding that horse that you think is going to be on the lead at first call or second call, that's going to be the key in those races. So really, really, really speed favoring, even more so than Del Mar. I mean, Del Mar was very speed favoring as well in the fall, but you know, in the summer, I should say, but it started to get a little bit more fair as the meet went along. This has actually gotten more pronounced, I would say, as the meet has continued for Santa Anita. So, wow, really hard to see some of these numbers, and you know, certainly hard to bet some of these horses coming from further back. Now, when we talk about the turf course, we're going to look at the turf sprints, which are on the flat surface versus the downhill, and the turf routes. We will have the downhill. Those are disaggregated out. If you go to NYRA Bets, I have that data disaggregated for you there, but just don't have it here on the presentation today. I will have it for next week, though. We have 7 cases, so we're starting to get a significant end count, so to speak, for those downhill turf races. Didn't want, you know, to do it with too small of an end count and kind of be a little bit misleading. So in the sprints, though, on the turf that are on flats, we've had 16, turf routes 27. And you've seen, you know, listen, honestly, the turf course at Santa Anita does tend to play a little bit more fair. Speed of the speed hasn't necessarily been a cheat code there. Trackers have done well. You've seen horses close from the back in the sprints. Same thing's kind of true on the turf. You've seen a couple of gate to wire horses, but a lot of horses have been tracking and closing. Honestly, the turf course at Santa Anita always has played fair, in my opinion. You can see different types of winners, different types of horses coming from off the pace, different type of horses going gate to wire, different type of horses closing from way back. So I really do think when you're playing the turf as a handicapper, it opens up a little bit more. That's exactly what I was saying earlier. When you're betting Santa Anita on the dirt, you're going skinny and you're looking for speed. In the turf, you can spread and you can really feel confident selecting any type of runner based upon how you think the pace dynamics are going to work out or the quality of the field, et cetera. So Santa Anita has always been a little bit better, I think, on the turf. And I've always thought their turf course plays remarkably fair. And the numbers kind of bear that out, that you see, like I said, you see some success with each type of running style. And it's not so overwhelming in one direction or the other. Now let's wrap up with Keeneland and let's talk about their winning trip analysis for on the main track. Dirt sprints, you've seen people always talk about how Keeneland is speed favoring, and it certainly is. 38% leading at the 3/8 or half mile mark, 43% tracking from within 3 lengths, only 19% closing, but 19% is not bad, honestly. For dirt sprints, that's a little bit better than it's a lot better than Santa Anita. It's a little bit better than Belmont at the Big A. In the dirt routes, you're seeing, again, a pretty even distribution of horses. Yes, you've seen a few more gate to wire winners going 2 turns on the dirt there in the 12 cases that they've had, but you've seen horses closing from further back as well. So you've had success running in different ways. I think the dirt course there, I don't want to say the main track is fair in terms of, I do think sprinting, you do want to be forward generally, but that's true in general. I think at any track, not just Keeneland. So like I said, yes, maybe a little bit speed favoring, 2 turns, maybe a little bit speed favoring, but you can still see success with horses coming from further off the pace. And then finally, let's wrap up with how things are playing on the turf at Keeneland. And again, you look at the turf sprints, pretty nice distribution. About a third of the winners have been leading at the half mile mark, half have been tracking, and 1 of the 6 have closed from further back. Again, turf sprints, not a huge end count, only 6 here. So maybe you don't want to take too much of that statistically away. However, turf routes, I think, is notable. We're up to 23 cases with turf routes at Keeneland, and virtually no gate to wire winners going 2 turns on the turf. Only 2 out of 23, 8.7%. You want to be tracking. You really want to be closing. This Keeneland turf course has played incredibly well to closers. Something to keep in mind. Even a horse like She Feels Pretty was sitting more than 3 lengths back at the half mile mark. She's even considered more of a tracker, but from a statistical standpoint, she fell into the closing category because she was more than 3 lengths back. So again, kind of looking at how this has been played out, you can see success with trackers. You've seen success with closers. But the bottom line is you've not seen much success going gate to wire, going 2 turns on the turf at Keeneland. So if I was handicapping and just looking at track trends and I see a horse I like that's a need to lead type of turf router, a little bit of a toss for me at this point because it seems to be running against the track, running against the way the course is playing. So something certainly to keep in mind. All right, friends. Well, that'll do it for this week's track stats. Hope you appreciated this data. And again, all of this is completely free. Go to NYRA Bets, download the NYRA Bets apps. You don't have to sign up for NYRA Bets or anything like that. You just go to the website and it's all there. It's all free. Like I said, Belmont, Big A, Keeneland, Santa Anita. We'll add Turfway later this year. We'll add Oaklawn. We'll add Tampa Bay Downs. We'll add Gulfstream Park during the championship meet. We got you covered with track stats, and this stuff is refreshed on a weekly basis. All right, friends. Want you to have a great week. Make sure to press that like and subscribe button to get all the best content from NYRA Bets YouTube. My name is Matthew DeSantis. Wish you a great and prosperous day at the races. And reminding you, friends, it's now post time.